The long-awaited release of David Syzmanski's retro-style first-person shooter DUSK is finally over. After previewing the game while in early access way back in January, it left me with really high expectations and a real hunger for more. But I was left with one big concern. Was Syzmanski leaving expectations so high with the first 2 episodes? Would he be able to raise the bar to the next level for the finale? Well, let's find out. DUSK is a retro-style FPS game designed like a shooter of the 90s, primarily resembling Quake 1 in its gameplay. It is developed by David Syzmanski and published by New Blood Interactive. It released in early access January 11, 2018 and finally had its full launch on December 10th. DUSK offers FPS gameplay that pays full respect to the legends of the 90s, giving players a fast-paced and adrenaline-filled experience with retro, stylized visuals to give that authentic feel. The level design is excellent throughout, but the last few levels begin to lose pace and feel like they were created from the bottom of the idea barrel, leaving a disappointing endgame experience. DUSK takes place in and around the fictional town of Dusk, Pennsylvania, where a Lovecraftian network of runes has been unearthed, gaining the attention of the government. It doesn't take long before a research team and the military set up base there and begin attempting to harness the power from these runes. Upon doing so, catastrophe strikes, causing numerous industrial disasters and most of the research team and soldiers to become possessed by dark forces. Those not affected quickly leave, and the town of Dusk is sealed off from the rest of the world with a large perimeter wall. The player takes on the role of a nameless treasure hunter who has been dubbed Dusk Dude by the community. After hearing rumours about treasure and riches lying hidden within the sealed town, the treasure hunter goes there in hopes of finding them. Instead of unearthing a fortune, the hunter is instead apprehended by the denizens of Dusk and brought to the outer farmlands and left to hang on a pair of meat hooks. The hunter manages to struggle free from the hooks, killing the chainsaw-wielding guards, and begins his journey of discovery and revenge, hopefully finding this rumoured treasure along the way. There isn't a whole lot more to the plot of Dusk other than there is an antagonist and you are out to get him. At the end of each of the episodes, there is a wall of text giving an epilogue to each one, but most of the story is told through writings on the wall, often found scattered throughout the levels and the environments themselves, if you stop to take them in. Like most FPS games from the 90s, the story takes the sidelines while the gameplay and action take over the spotlight. But thanks to the very well paced writing on the walls and the excellent level design, there is more than enough piecing together of the plot to keep those looking for one interested. The plot is pretty good overall. It isn't shy with showing its primary inspirations, that being Doom and Quake. Doom inspiring the military, demonic possession and government side of things, while Quake stands as the gothic and Lovecraftian influence. It keeps you gripped throughout, drip feeding you bits and pieces, leaving you wanting more as both the plot and the environments become darker and stranger with each passing level. It is done to greater effect than any other of the era that it inspires from, giving Dusk the crown of 90s FPS storytelling. The objective of Dusk is to battle your way through a variety of enemies in each level to reach its end, occasionally facing off against a boss monster of some kind. The game is separated into 3 distinctive episodes: the farmlands, the facilities, and the nameless city, each containing a total of 11 levels, 10 normal levels, and 1 secret level. Like all classic FPS games, each level contains a number of secrets to be found, often granting more powerful weapons earlier than you would normally find them, extra ammo, health, and the occasional Easter egg. As with all secrets in video games, they really add replayability, especially to those who love to 100% complete games. And with Dusk's nature, you never know what surprises can be found hidden in the strangest of places. At the end of each level, you are given a statistics screen showing how long it took you to complete the level, your total time for the episode, your total kills for the level, and how many secrets you found. In addition to that, there is also rewards to be unlocked for each level, those rewards being Completionist, Pacifist, Low Tech, and Untouchable. Completionist is for killing all the enemies and finding all the secrets within a level. Pacifist is for finishing the level without killing a single enemy. Low Tech is granted for completing a level only using the sickle or sword weapons. And finally, Untouchable is where you must complete a level without receiving a single hit. Such awards are certainly not for everyone, and most probably won't even bother with them all that much. But for the more old school hardcore veterans of the genre, they are definitely a challenge worthy of bragging rights. To help you on your journey, there is an array of weapons at your disposal, starting out with the dual-wielding sickles, which are later overtaken by a sword that can stealth kill enemies and block projectiles. Next is the pistol, which can be dual-wielded upon finding a second one. Then there is the lever-action shotgun that can also be dual-wielded, along with the destructive double-barreled super shotgun. After that you have the assault rifle, the hunting rifle that is essentially Dusk's version of a sniper rifle, and the crossbow that shoots ethereal bolts that can pass through enemies and walls, a grenade launcher, and finally the completely overpowered riveter that is the game's rocket launcher. All the weapons in the game feel great to use and are quite impacting and well balanced with the exception of the riveter. Its sheer damage output is ridiculous, making short work of even bosses if you have enough ammo, but it feels intentional. Its design seems to be that it is both the rocket launcher and the BFG of Dusk all in one. So it is hard to really call it a problem, as without it you wouldn't really have any boss weapon as such, resulting in the issue cancelling itself as one. There are 4 primary difficulty modes, each creatively named to further that 90s feeling of the game. Accessible is very easy, Go Easy is easy, I Can Take It is medium, and Ser Mideo is hard. There is also an additional mode called Duskmare for the masochistic players, where enemies literally one hit kill you. Along with the difficulties, there is an additional modifier called Intruder mode, where you begin each level with only the sickle weapons. The difficult levels of the game are suitable to their name and allow access to players of all experience and skill levels. But to get the true Dusk experience and to play the game as it was meant to be played, you really need to play it in the hard difficulty. It may be challenging, but only then does the game truly feel like a proper old school shooter of the 90s. Once you've finished all 3 episodes of the game, the fun doesn't have to stop there. Along with the campaign, there is also an endless mode which serves as a survival mode where the player needs to stay alive as long as possible against wave after wave of enemies. The mode also has a scoring system where points are gained for killing enemies. With each enemy you kill without being hit, a score multiplier increases. Once you're hit by an enemy, the multiplier reduces back to 1 and you need to build it back up again. There are 3 survival maps in total, each one designed after each of the episodes, along with spawning enemies from the episode it represents. The first one taking place on the farms, the second in the facilities, and the third at the cathedral. The survival mode is a nice addition that allows for more fun when you have either finished the game or are looking for more Dusk but not having the urge to play the main plot. It offers some of the fastest and most intense action that Dusk has to offer, but the lack of a competitive leaderboard or any goals for the scoring system makes its implementation bewildering and illogical. Along with survival mode, there is multiplayer deathmatch that is accessible through the Dusk World launcher. Here you can select your name, your character type and the colours that your character sports. But actually getting a deathmatch going has proven difficult, as any time I've looked to try out the multiplayer, there has simply never been a game running. Of what I've played of the multiplayer, that being one deathmatch when Dusk World first released, to describe it in one sentence I would say it is like being back in 1996 and playing Quake World all over again. But that is all it is, nostalgia. It is frantic, fast-paced and adrenaline-pumping action with plenty of bunny hopping. It is great fun if you can get a game rolling, but don't expect it to offer anything new. While Dusk has influences from many of the FPS games from the 90s, its gameplay is without a doubt that of Quake 1. From its ultra-fast paced nature, the necessity for quick reflexes, to the visuals, to the bunny hopping and rocket jumping, there is no mistaking that it is Quake 1 that the gameplay takes from. And it is that which makes Dusk stand out from the crowd from so many other retro-style FPS games that are now making their way onto the market. Most get their gameplay inspiration and influence from Doom, that is fast, frantic and utter mayhem, allowing for a lot of enemies on screen at once. But Quake was a different beast altogether, and while it didn't have the same body count that Doom did, its gameplay was far more fluent, faster and all round more exciting. And that is exactly what Dusk is. It is fast, it is chaotic, it is adrenaline inducing, and it has a constant flow to it that rarely slows down. I wouldn't go as far as to call Dusk's gameplay a revolution, or that it brings the retro FPS to the next level, but it certainly is the rebirth of the FPS genre that we've waited over 20 years to happen. The gameplay to Dusk is excellent, I honestly can't praise it enough, but what really makes Dusk stand out is the level design. At least for the most part. The first episode, titled The Farmland, centres around the player making their way through the outskirts of Dusk and attempting to get into the actual town and eventually into the military facility there. You travel through farms, houses, barns, churches, catacombs, mines, before eventually reaching the town itself. It really helps slowly bring the world of Dusk into perspective and gives an insight into what kind of community the denizens of Dusk were before all this. Along with the story building environments, the writing on the walls that you find on your travels begins to fill in the mystery behind what actually happened bit by bit too. When combined with the environments, it really starts to paint a picture without the need for lengthy exposition or cinematics. The levels of the first episode are more basic in comparison to the others, and take a little while before they really start to kick off. But as an introduction episode that introduces the player to the game and universe, it does an excellent job at doing exactly that. But it is the second episode, the facilities, where the level design really starts to get into its element, and where Syzmanski begins to show his true skills in design. It is here that the architecture and the general complexity of the geometry of the levels really begin to heighten. The levels are bigger, the structures are bigger, and the environments begin to tell a bigger story in ways you don't expect, especially as their construction slowly gets more alien and begins to play tricks on you. The second episode is definitely the best of the three, from the general flow of the levels to the creativity in their environments and trickery. The third episode, The Nameless City, I found to be disappointing when compared to the second. Considering it as the finale of the game, it starts off very slow due to showcasing the use and abilities of the sword. It is here where the level design begins to show itself as an alternate reality as opposed to the impression of a Lovecraftian and gruesome world that the end of the second episode gave. The levels are indeed still fluent, but they don't tell a story or have the moments of surprise like the previous did, and act more as a way of tormenting the protagonist than anything else. They just don't absorb you into the game in the same way. Near the end of the third episode, the levels begin to become weak, mixing up assets from the previous episodes along with a level that consists of literally one small arena and another where you move the gravitational pull to get around. That slows the pace of the game right down. Not to mention, it is possible to get stuck in an infinite loop when changing the gravity. It feels like the developer was running out of time and ideas, and the best they could come up with were odd and somewhat out of place levels. Despite the last few levels ending up disappointing, the final boss makes up for it with a competent fight. Between the level problems later in the episode and the utterly ridiculous and out of place design of the new enemies, episode 3 is by far the weakest of them all, leaving a somewhat bittersweet end to the game. In my preview of Dusk back in January, I expressed my concern that Syzmanski had outdone himself too early, and I was worried that he'd shown the best of the level design already, leaving little to work with for the third episode. And the final episode certainly feels that way. But if you are a completionist, you can go back to any of the levels you have previously completed and play them again to find any remaining secrets, enemy kills, or rewards that eluded you in your first attempt. It is a nice little touch that saves playing the whole game over from scratch. As a whole, the level design is excellent. Sure, there are a few hiccups here and there. Episode 1 is a bit slow to get to full momentum, while Episode 3 slips off the rails somewhat towards the end. But aside from that, it is brilliant. The levels are each distinguishable and rarely do you become disorientated or lost, thanks to the uniqueness of each room, keeping the fast pace of the game moving while showing its 90s inspiration. The atmosphere to Dusk is second to none, and without a doubt the biggest highlight of the entire game, thanks to the amazing work of Andrew Hulshult. Throughout the game there are two types of atmospheric music, the first being ambience that sets the mood of the environment and the level design, the second being the fast-paced, loud and often very heavy metal tracks that play during combat. A great example of how well the ambience tracks work would be with E1M3, the old-time religion level. During the quieter moments in that level, the tracks fit perfectly with the tones that fit the level's environments, such as the church, the graveyard and the catacombs. There is a sense of peace in the music, yet also one of tension, where you feel danger is only just around the corner and that it isn't a place of God. And while it is a track that is easy on the ears and has a calming tone about it, it nevertheless makes you feel uneasy. It is sheer brilliance. An example of combat music that stands out for me would be the track Erebus that plays in E2M6. Most of the track consists of a mix of hard-hitting drums and guitar, but throughout there are other subtle notes that help blend the track with the industrial and steel environment of the level. Another example of the combat music blending in with the environment would be Neo Babel. Here the combat track takes a more otherworldly feel to it to fit with the alien environments, not completely neglecting the soundtrack's heavy metal root either. It is a soundtrack that perfectly sets the mood in every level, be it one of horror, action or discomforting otherworldliness. There's a track to fit each and every environment, and it brings the game together seamlessly, creating an atmosphere that few games ever have. The full release of Dusk is what I've looked forward to more than any other title in 2018, and while the final episode certainly has its problems, it is still safe to say that Syzmanski delivered. From the fast-paced action to the brilliant atmosphere to the mostly excellent level and enemy design to the retro-stylized visuals to fit in with the 90s gameplay. Dusk is a clear love letter to an age of gaming that has long been forgotten by the industry. Dusk is the rebirth of the FPS genre, and could very well be the game that sends a message that the old school shooters aren't dead, and that there is a place for them in the modern video game market. It could be the game that shapes the modern FPS genre. But as much as I love Dusk and so desperately want to give it a 9 out of 10, I can't overlook the problems that the third episode brings. It does, after all, impact the endgame experience, and that is something I have criticised other games for in the past, and scored them respectively based on that. It would be unfair for me not to do it here, and with that, I give Dusk an 8 out of 10. As a whole, Dusk is everything I've waited over 20 years for in an FPS game. Action-packed, impacting weapons, horror, gore, fluent level design, and an unapologetically metal and fitting soundtrack. Despite my criticisms of Dusk, it is not just one of the best games of 2018, but one of the best games ever made.